Welcome back to the Roundup. We've got great stories today. The internet is annoyed at a purported agreement between Sony and Capcom to limit Resi 8 on competing platforms. But is it all just an understanding? Because we've got to take a deeper look. Then Microsoft, they're working on a new Windows 10 storefront that, surprisingly, might actually not be rubbish like the current one. And then Naughty Dog. It seems like they're sitting around and doing nothing. We've got the Avengers game with its director leaving, and then also Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, which is making a big comeback, we think. Plus, hey, a bunch more, and maybe some of that bunch more could involve you getting an axe in the post. Yeah, an axe plus art via, of course, our Patreon. Best way to support us. You'll get a bunch of cool shit in return, and keep your eyes peeled. There is going to be cool stuff coming. Okay, let's get into the news. Video game marketing is a messy business, and Sony have really been getting it in the neck this week. But a newly discovered agreement between Capcom and them has greatly annoyed the internet. And the reason why we're covering it a little bit later is because now the dust is settled and we know quite a bit more. So the belief here is that Sony are basically paying Capcom to ensure that the PlayStation versions of Resi 8 are just generally better than versions that are found on other platforms. Which obviously feels bad. Where Sony are reportedly entitled to feature, content, technical parity, DLC, demo exclusivity, 1 year of subscription service exclusivity, first right of refusal on subscription services, and Resident Evil products. And in return, Capcom get $5 million worth of first-party advertising. Now that whole thing was a big mess, spread around the internet. Thankfully, Richard Hogue, virtually legal host, has weighed in on this, and he basically says that this agreement is all about ensuring that Sony get value for their marketing investment. Hogue points out that many commenters are interpreting the technical and content parity wording as Sony paying Capcom to limit things like resolutions and other platforms, where in reality Sony are just trying to ensure that the PlayStation versions of Resident Evil 8 are as good as they could be. Now, this also goes for the stipulations that Capcom can't offer DLC exclusively on other platforms. Now, the agreement also states that Capcom aren't able to release Resident Evil 8 on competing subscription services within the first year, and that Sony get, first refusal on putting Resi 8 on, their own subscription service. Now, yeah, this is like disappointing news for Xbox Game Pass fans who would want Resi 8, but Hogue states that this is less about restricting competing platforms than it is giving Sony time to catch up if they want to. Of course, Sony don't actually have a Game Pass equivalent, but the terms of this agreement entitle them to a year of first refusal if they do decide to develop their own. So basically, that was a whole bunch of legal bullshit. It's just a future-proofing clause. That's what it is. And again, this is about getting value for a $5 million investment. And you can see why. What Capcom are getting is $5 million of advertising that they don't need to pay. So, obviously, for Sony then, if Resident Evil 8 dropped on Xbox Game Pass on day one for free, that would be bad news for Sony, if they were also going to be giving $5 million of advertising. Now, Hogue did just say, pinches of salt all around here, because he says that the agreement is hard to substantiate and could be unfinished and also outdated thanks to subsequent amendments or entirely fabricated. So that's the word on that so far. Who knows? It's probably not as dramatic a story as was initially reported and circulated. Now, in other Sony news, they just announced the PlayStation Plus Video Pass, which is going to let PS4 and PS5 users access Sony Pictures content as a part of their PS Plus subscription. But here's the funny thing, because it's only available in Poland currently, and it's going to be in testing for an entire year. So it kind of seems like Sony aren't even sure what to do with it, and I guess they're even further away from a Game Pass competitor than we thought if they're struggling to get even that out. Also, Jim Ryan, the Sony leader for games, announced that Sony have been quietly investing in first-party software for some time, and that this gen is going to have more exclusives than ever. Now, the first result of these efforts is actually an exclusive publishing relationship with Firewalk Studios, who are a bunch staffed by Destiny vets, and they're making a new multiplayer IP. But I think Jim Ryan's saying that makes a lot of sense considering that Sony have taken a lot of losses lately in terms of PR, and people have just seen Microsoft go really big with Game Pass and also throw around the acquisition money, so I think they really just wanted a positive acquisition and deal story that's attached to the Sony brand. So there you go, that's PlayStation Land for today. Well, Square Enix's ailing Avengers game has actually lost its creative director, who has left to rejoin Naughty Dog, where previously he'd basically risen through the ranks, eventually directing Uncharted 4: Lost Legacy. Now, the loss of a high-level creative can be rough at the best of times, but it could be especially damaging with the Avengers being in, just a bit in need of creative rejuvenation and it not having the best sort of news, even though they do seem to have a solid enough plan and a big Wakanda expansion, so we'll have to see for that one. But still, the decision to go back to Naughty Dog is a curious one, because the studio appears to be in a bizarre state these days, and we know about that because of Jason Schreier. So, this game as creative director, he's likely going to be working on The Last of Us remake because, according to Jason Schreier, there's not a whole lot else to be at Naughty Dog. The staff were reportedly moved on to the remake project because otherwise they were just sitting around idle while the studio's next projects were in pre-production. That's interesting. That's really interesting because usually pre-production is kind of done with an exploratory team, at least a lot of the time, while the previous production is in production. So it would seem to me that getting The Last of Us Part 2 actually out and released was essentially an all-hands-on-deck situation that robbed those future projects of, getting ahead in terms of pre-production. Now, apparently, the Last of Us Part 2 multiplayer project, which actually I'd be quite interested in based on The Last of Us Part 1's multiplayer, but basically, it doesn't seem to require that much staff, according to Jason, and also, The Last of Us Part 2 DLC appears to have been canned entirely, which I really find surprising, because the backlash happened, sure, but surely sales were high enough to greenlight more stuff there. It's a bit weird. The DLC for The Last of Us Part 1 was brilliant. Bit weird they wouldn't really do one for this game. So I wonder how blockbuster-obsessed Sony feel about one of their flagship studios seemingly just being forced to sit idle for a bit. Apparently, there may be a future where the Microsoft Store isn't shit. Yeah, Microsoft are working on a new store app that is designed for Windows 10 and intends to offer a modernized user experience for people and greater accessibility for developers. Not a moment too soon. Obviously, the Windows 10 store is in dire state. It is slow, it's ugly, it's difficult to navigate. It's got that weird Windows UX that I just don't think is good at all. But really, it's the policy changes that make this store more relevant and potentially good for us as customers. The reason being, developers will be able to submit raw exe or MSI packages to the store, as well as unpackaged Win32 files, and this means, a bunch of things. It's good for devs, but as an example, Game Pass PC games may no longer have to be in their weird encrypted state. Devs will also, there's implications there, but then devs will also be allowed to host their own apps and updates, and even employ their own in-app revenue schemes. That bypasses Microsoft's own store functionality in a way which would mean that Microsoft wouldn't take a cut. That really shows you that they want to sweeten the pot, right? If, say, you're Rockstar Games, would you rather your microtransactions happen on Steam, or even on an Epic where there's a store fee? Or would you rather implement your own payment service and roll it through the Microsoft Store where there'll be a 0% fee? Interesting. Now, discoverability and a streamlined user experience are going to be the, actual customer-facing priorities, Microsoft say. Yeah, look, the Microsoft Store, it's never been a go-to destination for PC gaming. Come on. It's just been embarrassing. But fair, Microsoft, they've consistently been fighting in the back foot. And that has actually prompted them to put in some real work and to do good stuff that's been pro-consumer. And that's why I think just these days, I'm feeling like I like Microsoft and their approach quite a bit. Now, the consoles aren't actually being left behind because Xbox Series X and S dev kits have now got access fully to AMD's FidelityFX toolkit. So, that'll be nice for devs. Basically, onwards and upwards. Okay, we've talked about so much, policy stuff. Let's talk about a video game because it very much looks like, and get hype, the Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic remake is in the works at Acer Media. And I am excited because, and I know this is embarrassing, it's a great game. I've seen little smidges, played little smidges, but I've never fully played KOTOR. Yeah, I know, sorry. I've been honest about that one, and that's why this is such an exciting project for me. Now, the company, Acer Media, they've proven really themselves with a good track record in Star Wars. They were in charge of the recent re-releases of Jedi Knight 2, Republic Commando, and Episode 1 Racer. Right, so that's all good stuff. They also ported KOTOR to iOS, so they're pretty familiar with KOTOR, and they did that alongside Jade Empire, of course, another venerable BioWare title. But of course, those were all straightforward port jobs. Yet now we're seeing Acer head up a genuine remake. I mean, when the rumors came out about this ages ago, they seemed surprising, but it seems like it's genuinely happening. Now they do work under Saber Interactive these days, and Saber Interactive themselves are pretty damn adept at remakes and remasters. Plus, they've actually reportedly pulled in a whole bunch of ex-BioWare talent, so in this one, hopefully they'll have everything they need to do the job right. And that is exciting. Alright, time for a real chunky quickfire section. Let's go! An upcoming Xbox Series XS update will quickly tell you which games are suspended in Quick Resume, as well as which games actually support the feature. And the more I use my console, the more I love Quick Resume. It's great. The user experience of that thing is just awesome. Now, this update is currently in testing, but it should make its way to the general population before long. And staying with Xbox, and still good news, the Xbox Live Gold requirement has officially been dropped for free-to-play titles, which finally puts Xbox on par with Sony and Nintendo. And it makes the likes of Apex Legends and Rocket League, actually be free-to-play over there. Now, speaking of Xbox and free-to-play, Sega's Phantasy Star Online 2 New Genesis is launching on Xbox and PC in June this year globally, but only on Switch and PlayStation in Japan. Weird. I mean, the original PSO2 took 8 years to come to the West, and only on Xbox and PC. So Xbox, we did a video on this. I really recommend you check it out, but they are just leading the fray on bringing some of these Japanese games to the West, and they're getting really close with Sega, which does make you wonder. So maybe we'll talk about that more in a video next week. Next, after several months of teases, a spate of server issues, and crashes on the day itself, Call of Duty Warzone finally nuked its own map. It wasn't all that great, though. There was a big build-up, and it just culminated in awkward missions in a brief cutscene. Go team, but hey, at least I hear the PPSH is very much popping off these days in that game. Okay, next up. Could 007 GoldenEye make a comeback? Well, IP holder Danjak LLC has registered a new trademark for the property, and that obviously means that speculation is running wild. A new GoldenEye would be cool. Very cool, so watch this space. Next up, Yoko Taro, the madman, the creator of Nier, is famed for his strange games, so him describing his new project with words like offbeat and somewhat unusual is certainly an exciting prospect. Apparently the man's got no idea how to explain or sell it, but something tells me it'll go over just fine. And speaking of Yoko Taro, not really being the most PR friendly at times, I mean, it's Yoko Taro, so him being completely offbeat is obviously PR friendly, to the point where Square Enix posted like a big thing of like him and the other big guy for Nier Replicant, where Yoko Taro basically just says, Nier Replicant's totally different to Nier Automata. It's a complete fluke, this whole situation. It's probably not going to sell that well, and Square Enix are probably going to be disappointed. And that's what he said to promote the launch of his own game on an official Square Enix blog. It just goes to show that everybody knows that Yoko Taro is such a lovable form of bonkers that even Square Enix see him joking at the expense of his own game release as good marketing for said release. So, you know what? Pretty cool. Man, like, between that and, how they do some of the Final Fantasy XIV stuff, I think they're really getting pretty good at audience there. Anyway, let's move on. It looks like Microsoft's $10 billion buyout deal of Discord is dead in the water. So, despite it being like pretty damn expected that this deal would go through, it's actually fallen through. And what's happened is Discord have just decided that actually they're doing well enough to just stay independent. So it seems to me, right, that, they could be bought out by Microsoft, and that would be a hefty payday for everybody. They could do that. But they probably would rather raise gigabucks via an IPO, by going public. I'm assuming they think they can go public and hit a valuation above 10 billion, right? Either that or, the people behind it just want to retain control. But there you go. Discord is remaining independent. I think that's good. The next up for acquisition news, Focus Home Interactive have actually acquired Stream On Studio. Now, you may not have heard of them, but you've probably heard of some of their games. They're the French outfit responsible for Warhammer 40k branded stuff, say Space Hulk Deathwing, Necromunda Hired Gun. Now, for this, no price was disclosed, but Focus Home have done that, and they're actually in active talks with other studios, which is interesting. Focus Home really do seem to be on the up these days, so interesting stuff. Then next up, well, with Xbox Game Pass targeting as many platforms as possible, could they be targeting Steam? No, actually, it might be the other way around, because according to Tyler McVicker, a guy who I think knows a thing or two about Valve were actually very keen on Game Pass existing on Steam. And that's kind of intriguing, because you would have expected it to have been Microsoft, going knocking on Valve's door rather than the other way around. So look, is this just a rumor? We do not know. I mean, Game Pass is going strong, so you could see a rumor like this going wild, but you do have EA Play on Steam, so it would make a bunch of sense if Xbox Game Pass came over there too. I mean, hell, EA Play is bundled with Game Pass Ultimate, released on the consoles, so you could see that all working out quite well, and loads of us just happening to have access to an insane amount of games without having to buy them. Interesting. And speaking of rumors, Phil Spencer's Microsoft shelves are, they're just getting out of hand, because livestream audiences, they're just laser focused on any little background detail with Phil Spencer's backdrops anytime he appears in a Zoom call. And it turns out that the Nintendo Switch has appeared on quite a few broadcasts recently. So are we just reading too much into the decor? Is Phil just being nice to his competition, his other companies? Or are Microsoft gearing up to tell us something? Maybe some deal with Nintendo? Who knows? But Microsoft are really social media savvy these days, and that would be a good way to tease it. Finally then, the sequel to the surprisingly good Sonic movie comes out next year, and, we've got some set photos came out that gave us our first look at Knuckles, thanks to a CGI stand-in figure. First of all, just like how Sonic looks like Sonic, Knuckles looks like Knuckles. That's good. But given the style controversy around the first movie's reveal, I have got to wonder if there's a Nightmare Knuckles about the place, and of course, if we'll ever see it. But there you go. That's it for me today. Man, so many stories. And I just want to say, thanks for coming back. Thanks for watching the channel. We had a few rough months as we were working on a bunch of internal things. And, as a part of that, we do actually have, I think 3 feature projects that we've been working on for ages. One of them was really a test project to get the whole thing going, but suffice to say soon enough, we'll be, doing big things. We do have big plans in the works. For me, more of the same. That's just boring. It's not an option. So there'll be more cool things coming, and I just want to say thank you for coming back. As we've got a bit more back into regular content, you guys have returned, and I'm really thankful for that. So have a great day. I'll see you next time.